Hi, I'm Donovan Keith, and in this video I'm going to show you how to quickly export an object with multiple levels of detail from Cinema 4D to the Unreal Engine. So to begin, I've got this simple scene here. I've got a 3D scan of a crab, which I've poly-reduced down, and I've got a slightly lower level of detail and an even lower level of detail that I've hand modeled. And this is something that you might use, for example, to create a custom collision shape for Unreal that's nice and fast to calculate. What I want to do is create an LOD stack with these three objects, so they get treated as one object in Unreal. So I'm going to select all three of them, and I'm going to go to my generators pull down, and I'm going to hold down my control or my command and my alt or option keys, and then I'm going to select LOD right here. So control and alt, LOD, is going to add my LOD object as the parent of these three objects. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to elbow crab. And you might have noticed that your objects seem to have disappeared. And that's because I've got viewport soloing on, which is a really helpful tool to use when you're trying to preview your individual LODs. Now, what I want to do is preview what the swap is going to look like once I get it to Unreal, just to make sure that this sort of works. So in my LOD object, I've got my criteria option, which is currently set to user LOD level. And I'm going to choose to set that to screen size V. You could also choose screen surface. I'm frankly not sure of exactly how Unreal is calculating their LOD switchovers. But as I dolly in and out of my scene, you'll see that we are swapping between different models and different materials for each model. Now, you'll probably want to use the same material, but I've got different colors on them to better illustrate this switchover. Okay, now that I've verified that this is working pretty well, what I want to do is save my Cinema 4D scene, and I would normally do that. Right now I'm not going to. And then I want to export this as an FBX. Now, where you choose to save your FBX files is to some extent a matter of personal preference. I'm going to create a new folder inside of my Cinema 4D folder called FBX. And inside of my FBX folder, I'm going to name it with the same name as my project. So crab.c4d becomes crab.fbx. Now, there are a lot of export settings here, and in general, what I like to do is only export that which is absolutely necessary. Because I've got a separate project file for this one model, I don't need to worry about selection only. However, if I had a large project file and I wanted to export subassets, I'd leave that turned on and select them one at a time. I don't want my cameras or my splines. No subdivision surface, so I'm not going to export that, nor do I want my lights. No animation on this model. Normals I do want turned on so that the surface shading translates over, and triangulate geometry I also want on so that there are no surprises in terms of how Unreal will triangulate my mesh. Nothing else here needs to be turned on. I do want to point out that the LOD name suffix is not necessary for Unreal. I've manually named these objects, and Unreal is smart enough to just unpack an FBX file that has an LOD built into it. I'm going to choose to send over my textures and materials, and depending on your workflow, you may want to embed your textures. So I'm now going to choose OK, which has exported my file, and I'm going to head over to Unreal where I've got a simple starter project created. So in here, what I want to do is create a new folder to hold my model. So I'm just going to show my sources panel over here, and I'm going to add a new folder. Let's call this folder models. And inside of my models folder, I'm going to want to import my crab FBX. So I'm going to right click and choose import to. And then I want to navigate to the location of my crab file, which for me is in my C4D folder, inside of that FBX folder that we just exported to. And I want to select my crab.fbx. I'm going to go ahead and choose open. And then there are some options here that are critical. The most important one is if you unfurl Show Advanced right here, you'll see an option for Import Mesh LODs. You want to turn this on. It's typically turned off. And everything else, I'm just going to go ahead and leave at defaults and choose Import. It's now going to import my crab model, and once it's done, this error message is going to pop up You're going to see this pretty much every time you export from C4D to Unreal, because Cinema 4D doesn't have a sense of what a smoothing group is, but everything's going to work just fine. So now that I've done that, I'm going to grab my crab and I'm just going to drag it into my scene right here. And I've tweaked the scale slightly. It's a little bit huge, and that's just because I like being able to see what's going on here. Now you'll see as I'm close to my model, I see my crab in high detail, and as I dolly out, I'm swapping to my lower levels of detail, and this is all automatically computed. If you want to make some changes to where that's happening, just double click on your model, and in the details pane, you'll have the options for your LODs. Now, if you don't see that details pane, go to Window, Details, make sure it's on. And in the details pane, we're going to see all of our LOD options a little bit down below here. And you'll see this screen size option is currently grayed out. If you scroll down further, you'll have the option to turn off auto compute LOD distances, which you can also set in your importer. And now you can manually adjust when you want each LOD to show up. I don't really ever want to see my LOD2, so I'm going to set this to 0.1, and we're not going to see it until we get really zoomed out here, and it's representing a very small portion of our total screen size. So that is basically it. That is how you take a model from Cinema 4D and export it out with a series of levels of detail for use in Unreal.